rethinking the topic of cosmology obviously involves a lot more than just simply questioning the geometric shape of terra firma. And the subject of the whole electric universe idea is something that I've been vaguely familiar with since even a little bit before I started looking into the flat Earth, but to be honest, there's just been so many various avenues and directions that I've felt drawn towards researching within this broader umbrella of enclosed cosmology for the past year that I honestly haven't had much of a chance to look into the electric universe or electromagnetism all that much yet, so. But then in the last couple of weeks, for whatever reason, I sat down and listened to almost a 3-hour presentation by Eric Dollard talking about the history of Tesla and electroengineering, and I was really just blown away. Link will be in the description below, and shout out to the channel Immune to BS for putting that up. I think I learned probably more about Tesla in that couple of hours than my whole entire life up to that point. So please note that I'm not at all making any kind of blanket endorsements here about Dollard. I don't know enough about the guy to even think about such a thing, so but I will say that I find his material and his stories fascinating. And even if a fraction of what he says is true, well, the implications of that are really pretty remarkable. There's just so much mind-bending stuff in there that it's really hard to summarize it all, and even though I confess I probably don't comprehend most of the technical aspects of it, even so, as I listened, I was really struck by how so much of what he was describing in terms of Birkeland currents and lines of force, and just essentially electricity itself being something which somehow functions in an interdimensional capacity. After a while, it's hard not to see the parallels between all these things that he's discussing with the entire subject of the spiritual realms and hyperdimensional cosmology. Especially when he got to the part where he mentions how Tesla supposedly discovered free energy by basically figuring out the specific electromagnetic frequency of the Earth itself. It was amazing. And then he mentions the toroid, and boom, my mind just almost explodes. And so that suddenly made me start thinking about the video made by my buddy D13 Watchman called The Greatest Secret in History Revealed, in which he's talking about the torus as somehow being a way of seeing the various Earth and cosmological models all working together somehow. And so once I started thinking about the torus or the toroid in terms of an enclosed electromagnetic cosmology, whereby electricity and magnetism and plasma and the ether are far less understood by mainstream science than commonly assumed, and almost certainly far more interwoven with the higher spiritual and dimensional aspects of enclosed cosmology, well, it's like things started to really click in a pretty insane way. Because when you overlay this concept of the toroidal electromagnetic field over, whatever flat Earth map, rather than a globe, it's pretty amazing how quickly you start to see the similarities and possible connections to all sorts of other concepts out there relating to enclosed cosmology and ideas on how the heavens or luminaries might work, or the question of there being some kind of mountain in the center, like Mount Meru or Olympus or whatever. It also ties into this concept of the cosmic pillar with a celestial wheel connected at the top of it, and it totally starts to mirror a lot of ancient depictions of the enclosed world, with there being some kind of dimensional conduit connecting the various realms. It's this idea of the world tree, which does start to tie into the occult concept of the tree of life, but it's this axis mundi concept, it's this trunk that basically somehow connects everything in the enclosed system in some kind of interdimensional way. In Nordic mythology, it's called Yggdrasil, and interestingly enough, that name was featured in the first Avengers movie, or actually, I think it was the first Captain America movie, which tied into Avengers movie, where they found the Tesseract. And the Tesseract, of course, was this cube which opened up a portal to another part of the universe. But this world tree or axis mundi idea is one that goes very far back into ancient times and seems to have permeated almost every culture, practically to the same degree that a belief in a flat Earth did. So. Now, my overall aim is really not to try and dive into every tiny detail and figure out all the, the quote, real mechanics of the cosmos and such, because honestly, I believe that sort of mindset is itself basically the bait that is used by the Fallen One to draw folks into chasing secret knowledge and get pulled deeper into Luciferian ideology of humanism and so on. So I'm way more interested in trying to take a step back and look at all these pieces in a very broad sense and seeing how they all fit together, because it's amazing how they really do, and how much the interplay of the concepts of like electricity and energy, or dimensions and spirituality, or frequencies and vibrations, positive, negative, and so on and so forth. All these terms and concepts and themes, interestingly enough, they permeate both the realm of Tesla's, quote, fringe scientific discoveries and the realm of New Age mysticism and spirituality. So this is something I want to tread very carefully into by recognizing and re-emphasizing the fact that we know that Satan has taken every aspect and every element of God's creation and somehow twisted it, commandeered it into being a vehicle for spreading his lies and Luciferian doctrines. And it's always about turning people away from worshiping the Creator and instead worshiping some part of the creation. And so, for instance, we can look at something like the very fascinating topic of cymatics and the experiments which many of us are already probably familiar with, involving the use of various sonic frequencies on a plate covered with sand or salt, and the grains arrange themselves into different complex patterns based on the frequency. And this is no magic trick or work of sorcery, but it's absolutely an incredible demonstration of how indeed this interplay of frequencies and matter and energy and geometry, they're a very real element of the created world somehow. But then, of course, the New Age mystic and the occultist will be all too ready to point to something like that as an example of the reality of things like sacred geometry and how it all goes back to the flower of life and the existence of higher spiritual dimensions and consciousnesses and everything else. So we have to walk a rather fine line here sometimes with this kind of research, because we're constantly having to work to exercise discernment between acknowledging the various pieces which are simply part of God's amazing creation and perhaps been obscured by materialistic Darwinian, Einsteinian physics and pseudoscience and such, and which pieces are then satanic spin-offs of these hidden realities, but then have been twisted into various occult mythologies and esoteric symbolism and everything. I mean, if you do a quick YouTube or Google search on the torus or the toroid, you will very quickly begin to see that the torus itself is employed heavily as a central New Age icon and concept. You could almost say that it serves as a sort of encapsulation of the basics of New Age theology. They'll talk about how the torus is found in many natural forms within nature, very similar to something like the Fibonacci sequence and spiral. And of course, how even in the globe model, the electromagnetic field is said to be toroidal in shape. But then it goes way further into it being sort of a way of visualizing how energy is supposed to simultaneously flow inward and outward during meditation. And the torus is actually used even as a visual aid in meditation, sort of like a type of mandala. And it's also used in a very generic sense to represent the whole idea of the ebb and flow of energy, the cyclical in and out, how everything is connected, and how the all is one and the one is all, and this is just the whole idea of monism or oneism and so forth. But throughout all this kind of intense research on electromagnetism and toroidal energy, for whatever reason, I keep thinking back to the verse in Ephesians 2 where Satan is called the ruler of this world and the, quote, prince of the power of the air. And I've actually long wondered about just what exactly that phrase in that verse might mean, since most commentaries will tend to focus on just the basic idea of Satan being in control of all the earthly systems of man and the ruler of the fallen world, which of course is absolutely true. But what about that, quote, power of the air? I mean, is that just about flying or the heavens and the stars or whatever? But as I've been digging into all these crazy rabbit trails involving Tesla and Goddard and the universe, the electric universe idea, it's getting harder and harder not to think that it might actually have to do maybe more with just the plain and obvious interpretation of it being the power that we've all seen crashing through the air during a lightning storm. Now, when you contemplate this idea in conjunction with a lot of the pagan mythologies, which feature a god of thunder such as Thor, or of course the Greek god Zeus with his thunderbolts and everything, to me it would seem to fit together in a lot of ways, since those quote gods are really in the end nothing more than just different archetypes for Lucifer anyhow. And speaking of archetypes, you have the whole Prometheus myth, and this idea of stealing the fire of heaven and giving it to man as a gift and everything. And like I said, there's so many avenues to explore and dots to be connected that it's pretty incredible. And so the bottom line for me is that it's the creator who made all of these forces, all of these dimensions, all these systems which somehow work together. But Satan, as a fallen angelic being, was privy to all kinds of knowledge about the creation that we humans were not. And so whatever the physics and or metaphysics of the enclosed world system might actually be, Satan has actually known a whole lot about it since before humanity was even in the garden. And personally, I believe that things like this electromagnetic universe concept might really make sense as a vehicle through which he's working to bring science and spirituality together under one banner, into one cohesive thing. It's into this era of spirit science that we're being primed to accept and embrace the coming Antichrist, and this miraculous power that he will seem to have. And he and his power will be embraced by all sides, by both the religious and the non-religious, by both the mystic and the materialist, by both the occultist and the scientist. And so that's my thoughts on all this. I just kind of wanted to cram it all together, throw it out there, see what you guys think. Really interested in your feedback and seeing what other kinds of directions this might take us. Thanks.
A fundamental element of human nature is the need for creative work, for free creation without the arbitrary limiting effects of coercive institutions. That a decent society should maximize the possibilities for this fundamental human characteristic to be realized.
Sacred geometry was preserved throughout history in Freemasonic circles, since it was believed to be important knowledge revealing the secrets of our universe. The secret of sacred geometry is that vibrations or sounds form geometric patterns. Goethe reputedly said that indeed geometry is frozen music. Music is geometry and geometry is music. The basis of the universe is form and pattern. Both are organs of perception, and the phenomenal world we perceive seem to be best understood as systems of pure pattern, or as geometric structures of form and proportion. Due to this, many ancient cultures chose to examine reality through the metaphors of geometry and music. Sound, like word and rhythm, forms the trinity of the shamanic power of language. Sound of a certain octave is reputedly able to produce psychic, psychological, or emotional effects, and also freeze water, kill a man, or break down walls, as in the biblical legend of Jericho. The frequency of 432 Hz is deeply intertwined in nature. However, most music worldwide has been tuned to 440 Hz since the International Standards Organization endorsed it in 1953, following the prior recommendation of the Nazi Party spokesman Joseph Goebbels in 1939. Research suggests that the international standard of 440 Hz tuning generates a deliberate unhealthy effect in the environment and human physiology. According to Brian T. Hollins, it brings about an unnatural 8 Hz change in how we think and how our DNA regulates our genetic makeup. The structure of certain sacred architecture contains within it complex geometry which mimic the biogeometry of life and generate harmonics that have a noticeable effect on people's states of awareness. When combined with the chants and mantras, people could quite literally massively amplify their consciousness. There is pervading the whole universe a single homogeneous resonance, a sound or tone which acts, so to speak, as the awakener or vivifying power, stirring all the molecules into action. Without this resonance or motion amongst the quiescent particles, there would be no visible universe. Alexander Lauterwasser writes in The Creative Music of the Universe, at the physical level, the intricacies, beauty, and interrelationships of what could be called the superconscious designs of the universe are gradually being revealed. From this perspective, there is no essential difference between the structure of an atom, galaxy, a chakra, a crop circle, or even the Sufi whirling dervish ceremony. It is only a matter of scale and perception. As above, so below. Within these phenomena lies something, some process perhaps that suggests the superconscious design with its fundamental archetypal patterns and displays of unity. Professor Robert Moon at the University of Chicago has demonstrated that the entire periodic table of elements, literally everything in the physical world, is based on these same 5 forms. Sacred geometric shapes can occupy both a static and dynamic position. The static position is a low entropy state, whereas the dynamic position is a high entropy state. Hence, geometry can be used for both destructive and creative purposes. To give an empirical example related to the dodecahedron, Moon showed that the last natural element of the periodic table, uranium, was based on the form of 2 connected dodecahedra being torn apart. This rupture creates a toxic nuclear radiation. Interestingly enough, the most intriguing of all platonic solids and the most mystically significant is the dodecahedron, i.e. the 5th element, aether. The ancient Greeks considered knowledge of the dodecahedron a closely guarded secret and feared that this pattern could cause tremendous destruction if misused. Only hints at this pattern's existence were given publicly, as in Plato's famous statement that the Earth seen from above appears like a 12-sided leather ball. Modern Russian scientific research has discovered that there is indeed a dodecahedral pattern to the Earth's crust. The Earth is a living crystal with energy meridians much like the human body. Further to this, findings in 2003 from NASA reveal that the shape of the universe is a dodecahedron based on phi, the golden ratio. The dodecahedron was also found to have importance in relation to DNA. Dr. White mapped out the relationship between the amino acids across the 3D surface and found that it formed a dodecahedron. The universe is a dodecahedron, the Earth is a dodecahedron, DNA folds into the dodecahedron. As above, so below. As you sit here, millions of cells are splitting, undergoing mitosis, and the whole process is being guided by hyperdimensional geometry. Phi, the golden ratio 1.618, is the universal constant of the design within the physical, i.e. phi cycle, reality. Phi can be found throughout the universe, from the spirals of galaxies to the spiral of a nautilus seashell, from the harmony of music to the beauty in art, from the microscopic to the macrocosmic. The constant symmetry of the golden ratio throughout nature also attests to the holographic nature of reality. In the 15th century, Fibonacci discovered that if you add 1 to itself, then 2 to 1, then the sum 3 to 2, and the sum 5 to 3, etc., then you end up with a series of numbers 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, etc. the ratios of these one to another dance around and approach more and more closely to the golden ratio. These ratios describe the most efficient way of packing spirals about themselves.
Aloha. I wanted to do a real short, quick video as a follow-up to the last video I did on talking about the Om symbol and the chakras, and specifically the heart chakra in relation to the Fibonacci sequence and the tree of life and the spiral of life and the numerological perspectives. One thing I missed that I just realized within the last hour was the way the Fibonacci sequence lays over the spiral of life, and this is all new to me, where the Fibonacci sequence lines up to the Merkaba and the heart chakra in the center beingness, the bridge. So as we are bridges and we are children of the earth is also a bridge. So it would make sense that the as above, so below perspective of our center beingness, our soul essence, which is not held in the brain or in the physical vessel or anything that is physical at all. It's the soul expression of who and what we are. The bridge of that space being the heart-centeredness, and us having the potential to go either into the lower chakras to do that work, to have an experience, to learn, to process, to grow, and go into the higher spaces to do the same thing and anchor and expand all of those energy centers all at the same time during the everlasting moment through our individual and collective experience. So not just having the idea of one so-called clock, and that relates to the clock structure at the same time, like how we understand our time as in relation to the sun, and also the moon having its own clock, the universal clock, the way the stars are moving, when you're born according to the stars, according to the light body energies that we call planets. All of these have energetic properties, and how I was seeing this in relation to the flat earth model, as I didn't recognize it before, but you can see the 9 to 9 in this map actually creates the yin yang, and then you can see in between both the 6 and the 3. So I was seeing the sun as your center space, your fire essence, your bridge essence is your 6, which is your heart chakra, the 6th center beingness. And then you have the physical reality, which is the 3, the lower chakras, like I was explaining before, or the moon energy, the way you are birthed into this physical reality through the divine feminine essence. So the balance between the sun and the moon is what brings you your essence into this experience and has the foundation to your fire through your experience. And as you live in this physical reality, you are both living in the up and down frequency of this, like this pattern on the bottom, the wave frequency. You can see that as through time, the collective consciousness through time, like the stages of consciousness in previous videos, the Mayan calendar in reference to the step pyramid, how it goes up in consciousness from the nationalistic version, the tribal, to the cultural, to the national, to the universal consciousness, the layers of consciousness through time as the bigger calendar. So this is one big giant clock, and you can see this as, this is how I was seeing it. So this is how I envision the flat earth numerologically in reference to time, the sun, the moon, the balances of light and dark, the on and off, our experience as a whole, as the heart essence energy existing in the physical reality. So that is basically all I wanted to share in this video. I'm sure I'll have some more to share, but this was kind of just an addendum to that video, and I wanted to put it out there because it's how I'm actually seeing this. And I haven't looked into any of the people are talking about heart-shaped maps and all that stuff. I haven't looked into any of that stuff yet, but I'm curious to see what they're coming up with, because this is actually a heart energy, as a heart shaped in reference to sacred geometry. This is the sacred geometrical shape of the heart earth plane, and our children. So that's basically it. Yeah. Thank you for joining me.
caught in the crossfire. It's caught in the crossfire.